Good morning, Goose.
Howdy folks, and welcome to Goose Unlimited. I'm your host Jay, and today I'm excited to bring you the next video of our precision budget LR308. I had to shoot this video over 2 days. Day one, finally got to test fire the rifle and was running out of time, had some hiccups, had to finish it on day two. Because of the wind in the video, I'm going to be doing some more voice overlays than I typically do. So I tested all three of the uppers. I tested the stock Palmetto State Armory upper, as well as my 308 build and my 6.5 Creedmoor build. Now for the 6.5 Creedmoor, all I had to use was some Aguila 140 grain full metal jacket. Aguila is not known to be great ammunition, and I did have a couple of interesting things with it. Ironically, throughout the videos, the Aguila shot well enough. Actually, the 308 did a little better than expected. So for 308, I did some 150 grain Aguila. This 150 grain Norma, also full metal jacket, and then some Winchester M80. All the 308 ammo that I have, I bought during the pandemic, and that's pretty much all they had. So far I'm happy with the builds. Using this ammunition, my last two groups for the build uppers were at about an inch. It's rainy. I didn't have a lot of time to get out there and really shoot this stuff today, but at a quick group at about an inch, a little over an inch, with the cheapest ammo I could find, I am not dissatisfied.
So the first thing that I'm doing here is I am removing the upper receivers from the lower, removing the bolt carrier group and charging handle, and then I'm going to position the upper receiver in my lead sled so that whenever I look down the barrel, the target at 100 meters is perfectly centered through the bore, the line of the bore. Once I get that done, I'm going to be very careful not to move or adjust the upper receiver. As I look through the optic, I'm going to see where the target is in relation to my crosshairs, and then I'm going to make adjustments accordingly. If the target is low in my crosshairs, I'm going to adjust the scope up. If the target is high, I'm going to adjust it down, and so forth until the target is centered in my crosshairs. And then from there, I'm going to double check through the bore, make sure nothing is moved and that this target is still there, and then confirm in the scope again. Once that is complete, the optic is now bore sighted to the barrel, and then we're going to swap out from one to the next until we get all three upper receivers bore sighted. Now when you're working with multiple calibers, I highly recommend that you double check and confirm that your ammo is going to match your firearm or your barrel. You can see that I read the box first, and now I'm visually inspecting the markings on the barrel to confirm that I do have the correct ammo for the correct barrel that I'm about to use. Before I begin firing, I want to confirm that the gas block is adjusted to the fully open position according to the manufacturer's instructions. This will allow me to close off the gas block in increments as I'm firing to find that sweet spot. In test firing this firearm, because it has an adjustable gas block, we're going to begin by loading one round into the magazine and firing it. If the bolt locks back after the round is fired, we know that there's enough gas going through the system to properly operate the bolt. If the bolt does not lock back after the round is fired, then we know that there is not enough gas going through the system to operate the bolt properly, or there may be another issue such as a loose gas key or a loose gas block. As I fire the first round, you may notice a couple of things. First, you're going to notice a cloud of dust coming out of the bag that I'm resting my firearm on. At first it might look like smoke, but it truly is only dust. The second thing that you might notice is that the bolt did not move all the way to the rear and lock back on the empty magazine. I load another single round into the magazine, load the magazine into the firearm, send the bolt forward. I take aim, I squeeze the trigger. Just like before, the bolt does not cycle far enough back to lock back on the empty magazine. I send the bolt forward, I remove the magazine, and begin to check the spring pressure on the buffer system. I load the magazine back in, pull the charging handle to the rear, make sure that I can get it to actually lock on the empty mag. After that, I load another single round into the magazine, load the magazine, and fire again. The results of the third round are the same as the first and the second. After firing the third round and locking the bolt to the rear manually, I noticed that the spring felt stiff. I decided to lubricate the buffer spring. I also took the time to grab a different bag for my rest and made adjustments to my scope. After firing a fourth round with the same results of the previous three, I decided to recheck the gas block settings. I closed the gas block all the way and then count out 15 clicks as I open the gas block up, which should set it to the completely open position. I want to make sure that I rule out the position of the gas block setting before I do anything else. I fire 5th and 6th rounds, single load at a time with the same results. There's not enough gas going through the system to lock the bolt to the rear on an empty magazine. Wanting to rule out the rifle length buffer system as the culprit for the system's short stroking, I decided to swap out the lower receiver for one that had a carbine length buffer system. I followed the same initial procedure for test firing, loading a single round into the magazine, firing it, doing this 3 times. All 3 times the system short stroked, causing the bolt not to lock back on an empty magazine. This rules out the rifle length buffer system as the culprit for the short stroke. Realizing the 6.5 Creedmoor was going to need some work, I decided to move on to the 308 upper receiver. Following the same process, loading one individual round in the magazine, firing it, checking, and moving on to a second and a third. With the 308 upper, the first round did allow the bolt to lock back. Continuing on with the test, the second round did the same. On the third round, though, the bolt did not lock back on the empty magazine. After that, I adjusted my optic and continued to fire in groups of 3 for grouping purposes and zeroing. It appears that the 308 upper receiver also is not receiving enough gas through the system to operate the bolt correctly. Moving on to the stock Palmetto State Armory, I load one round into the magazine. I've never had a problem with this upper receiver and don't expect to today. I fire the round, the bolt locks open on the empty magazine. From there, I load 3 rounds into the magazine and begin to group for 0. I fire my 3 rounds without any malfunctions, and then I adjust my scope and fire 3 more rounds. All these rounds fire flawlessly with 0 malfunctions. This leads me to believe that the buffer system is definitely not the culprit to the short stroking of the system. After I was finished on the range, I went into the shop and removed both handguards and gas blocks on my upper receivers and measured the gas ports in the barrels. On the 6.5 Creedmoor, I got 0.0745 inch, and on the 308, I got 0.086 inch. Now, my research suggested that the gas ports on a 20-inch AR-10 or LR308 could be anywhere between 0.089 to as large as 0.116 inch. So what I decided to do is chalk up the upper receivers in a vise on my drill press, square everything up, and then open up the gas ports using a 3/32 drill bit. I did this, cleaned everything off, and then went back out to the range. On the range, I performed the same test for both the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmoor upper receivers. First, I loaded one round into the magazine and fired that round, checking to see if the bolt held open on the empty magazine. The bolt held open on both the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmoor. After that, I loaded 3 rounds into the magazine and fired 3 consecutive rounds. Each time, the rounds ejected and loaded the following round in, and then the bolt held open on the last round over the empty magazine. Both upper receivers functioned flawlessly once the gas port was opened up. One thing that I noticed on the 6.5 Creedmoor brass was the primers. Even though the load development hadn't changed and the pressures inside the barrel hadn't changed, there were signs of overpressure on the primers. I had one burst primer and then 2 primers that seemed to have the opposite of a crater. Knowing that the pressure inside the barrel did not increase from opening the gas system, I did some research and found that whenever you have too much gas in the system on the 6.5 Creedmoor, it is possible for this to occur. After my last round was fired, I went downrange and checked the target. To my surprise, both the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmoor groups came in at approximately 1 inch. This was a surprise as I was still shooting a Gila ammunition through both of them. Seeing this size group with low quality ammunition gives me hope for when I use high quality ammunition. When weather and time permitted, I brought the 6.5 Creedmoor back out to the range. The sole purpose was to use my last 3 remaining rounds to dial in the gas system. Before firing my first round, I reduced the amount of gas flowing through the system. I fired 1 round, checked the brass, reduced it again by another 3 clicks or so, fired it again, reduced it 1 last time. None of these 3 rounds that I fired had any signs of overpressure or popped primers. The primers were very comparable to the ones previously shot before drilling out the gas port. I just want to say thank you all for watching this video. Hopefully you guys found something useful in it. I look forward to coming out with more content and with better ammunition and better results downrange. Please, if you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
See you later, Goose.